The blood-red sun dipped low over Willits, Colorado, casting long shadows across the dusty Main Street as Zara McKenzie pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, aware of the whispers that followed her like persistent flies. At 26, she had buried 3 husbands in 5 years, each death more mysterious than the last, and the town had already decided her fate. She was cursed, a black widow, a harbinger of death to any man foolish enough to take her hand. The year was 1879, and Zara had arrived in Willits as a bright-eyed bride of 21. Her first husband, Thomas Walker, had been a shopkeeper with kind eyes and gentle hands. Their marriage had lasted 8 months before he was found dead in their store one morning. No marks upon him, just a peaceful expression as though he'd simply decided to stop breathing. The second, Edward Fleming, a cattle rancher with land on the outskirts of town, had courted her despite the rumors. They'd been married less than a year when his horse returned without him. They found him at the bottom of a ravine, his neck broken. An accident, the sheriff had said, though his eyes had lingered on Zara longer than necessary. Her third husband, Daniel Patterson, had been a banker, a widower himself with no children. He'd laughed at the town's superstitions, proudly walking Zara down the aisle as townsfolk crossed themselves. 6 months later, he died in his sleep, his heart simply stopping without warning or reason. Now, as Zara walked toward her modest home on the edge of town, the stares burned into her back. Mothers pulled children closer, men touched the brims of their hats and stepped aside, and women clutched at their husbands' arms as if Zara might snatch them away. "Afternoon, Mrs. Patterson," Sheriff Mills said as he passed her, one of the few who still acknowledged her existence. "Sheriff," Zara replied, her voice soft but steady. She continued walking, ignoring the familiar ache in her chest. She'd loved each of her husbands in different ways, Thomas with the passion of youth, Edward with a growing maturity, and Daniel with the quiet companionship of those who understood loss. Each death had carved another hollow in her heart until she was more empty space than person. The sound of hooves and wagon wheels made her turn. A stagecoach was arriving, unusual for this time of day. Willits wasn't a regular stop on the route west, just a place where the road happened to pass through. The coach pulled to a halt outside the Willits Hotel, dust billowing around the wheels. Zara paused, curious despite herself. New faces were rare in Willits, and rarer still were those who didn't arrive already knowing her story. The coach door opened, and a man stepped out. Even from a distance, Zara could see he was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a worn leather duster. He wore a cowboy hat pulled low, and when he lifted his face to survey the town, she glimpsed a strong jaw darkened with several days' worth of beard. He turned, helping an older woman descend from the coach, then paid the driver before retrieving 2 battered bags. As the stagecoach pulled away, the man and woman stood in the settling dust, strangers in a town that had few secrets. Zara continued home, putting the newcomers from her mind. They would learn about her soon enough, and then they would look at her with the same mixture of fear and fascination as everyone else. Her cottage sat alone at the end of a winding path, far enough from town to give her peace, but close enough that she wasn't completely isolated. She'd bought it with money from Daniel's estate, determined to support herself rather than marry again. The townsfolk had been relieved. No one wanted to be husband number 4. Inside, she busied herself preparing a simple supper, trying to ignore the silence. The house was too empty, too still without another presence to fill it. Sometimes she thought she could hear her husband's voices, Thomas laughing, Edward humming as he washed for dinner, Daniel reading aloud from the newspaper. But they were just ghosts, figments of her lonely imagination. A knock at the door startled her so badly she dropped a plate. It shattered on the floor, and for a moment she stood frozen, staring at the broken pieces. No one ever called on her. Even the peddlers avoided her house. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Zara gathered her courage and opened the door. The cowboy from the stagecoach stood on her porch, hat in hand. Up close, she could see his eyes were a startling green, clear and direct as they met hers. "Evening, madam," he said, his voice deep and rough-edged. "Name's Garrett James. I was told in town that you might have a room to let." Zara stared at him, speechless. "Who told you that?" "Fella at the hotel. Said they were full up on account of some cattle buyers in town, but that the widow out this way sometimes took in boarders." "That's not true," Zara said. "I've never taken in boarders." Garrett James shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "Well, I'm sorry to have troubled you, madam. It's just that my aunt and I need a place to stay for a spell while I look for work." The aunt he'd helped from the stagecoach. Zara hesitated. She had the room, 3 bedrooms in a house meant for a family she'd never have. And the extra money would help. Her funds from Daniel's estate wouldn't last forever. But they didn't know about her. They didn't know what the town called her behind her back and sometimes to her face. The cursed widow. The Black Widow of Willits. "Your aunt," Zara said slowly. "Is it just the 2 of you?" "Yes, madam. My Aunt Bess and me. We're heading to California, but our funds ran low. Thought to stop and work a spell, save up for the rest of the journey." Zara knew she should turn him away. Send him back to town with his aunt. Let them find out about her from someone else. It was kinder that way. But the thought of another voice in the house, of not eating another meal alone, was too tempting. "I have 2 spare rooms," she heard herself saying. "But there are things you should know before you decide to stay here." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" Zara took a deep breath. "The town believes I'm cursed. I've had 3 husbands, Mr. James, and they've all died. People say I killed them, though no one can prove how." She expected him to back away, to stammer an excuse and hurry back to town. Instead, he studied her face for a long moment. "Did you?" he asked finally. "Kill them?" "No," Zara said, lifting her chin. "I did not." Garrett nodded as if he'd expected this answer. "Then we'll take the rooms if the offer stands. My aunt's waiting at the hotel. What's your price?" Zara named a figure lower than she'd intended, still certain he would change his mind once he heard the town gossip. But Garrett simply nodded again. "Fair enough." "I'll fetch Aunt Bess and our things. We'll be back within the hour, Mrs. McKenzie," she said. "Zara McKenzie, though most folks call me Mrs. Patterson still after my last husband." "Mrs. McKenzie," he repeated, settling his hat back on his head. "Thank you for the rooms. We'll try not to be a bother." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Mrs. McKenzie, I don't put much stock in curses. Been around too long to believe in such things." As Garrett walked away, Zara stood in the doorway, a strange feeling washing over her. It wasn't hope she'd learned not to hope for anything, but it was something close to it. A small crack in the wall she'd built around herself. She looked down at the broken plate still scattered across her floor. Perhaps it was an omen after all. True to his word, Garrett returned with his aunt within the hour. Bess James was a small woman with gray-streaked dark hair and Garrett's same green eyes. She had a no-nonsense manner that Zara found instantly comforting. "Thank you for taking us in, Mrs. McKenzie," Bess said as Zara showed them to their rooms. "It's been a long journey from Kansas, and these old bones aren't what they used to be." "You're welcome," Zara replied, surprised at how rusty her social graces had become after years of isolation. "Will you join me for supper?" "It's nothing fancy, just a stew." "We'd be delighted," Bess said before Garrett could respond. "Wouldn't we, Garrett?" "Yes, madam," he agreed, setting down their bags. After we get settled, I'd be happy to chop some wood for you as well. Noticed your pile's getting low." Zara nodded, uncertain how to respond to such ordinary kindness. "Thank you. There's an axe by the woodpile." She left them to settle in and returned to the kitchen, adding more vegetables to the stew to stretch it for three. She could hear them moving about, quiet voices and footsteps in rooms that had been silent for too long. As she worked, she wondered what Garrett's story was. He wasn't like most cowboys who passed through. There was something steadier about him, more purposeful. And traveling with his aunt was unusual. Most men his age would be on their own or with a wife and children. By the time they joined her for supper, Zara had set the table with her best dishes, the ones she hadn't used since Daniel died. Garrett had indeed chopped wood, and the extra exertion had left a healthy flush on his tanned face. "This smells wonderful," Bess said, taking a seat. "It's been ages since we've had a home-cooked meal." Garrett washed his hands at the basin before joining them. "My aunt's being kind. Truth is, neither of us can cook worth a damn, begging your pardon for the language." Zara found herself smiling, the expression feeling strange on her face. "Then you're easy to please. I'm no great cook myself." As they ate, Bess told Zara about their journey from Kansas, where they'd left after Garrett's uncle Bess's husband had died the previous year. "Henry always wanted to see the Pacific," Bess explained. "Said a man shouldn't die without seeing both oceans. So when he passed, I decided I'd see it for him. Garrett was kind enough to accompany me." "It was the least I could do," Garrett said. "Uncle Henry gave me work when I needed it most." "And what work do you do, Mr. James?" Zara asked. "Little bit of everything, ranching mostly. Worked as a trail boss for a few years. Did some scouting for the Army before that." He took a sip of water. "And please call me Garrett. Mr. James was my father and he's long gone." "Garrett," Zara repeated, the name feeling intimate on her tongue. After supper, Garrett insisted on helping with the dishes while Bess retired early, claiming exhaustion from the journey. Zara washed while Garrett dried, his large hands careful with her delicate plates. "Your aunt is lovely," Zara said to break the comfortable silence. "She is," Garrett agreed. "Raised me after my parents died in a fever outbreak when I was 10. She and Uncle Henry never had children of their own." "That's very sad," Zara said, thinking of her own empty rooms. "Life has sad parts," Garrett said simply. "Doesn't mean the whole story is tragic." Zara looked at him, surprised by the wisdom in his words. "That's a generous view. Just practical." He set down the last plate. "Speaking of practical matters, I'll head into town tomorrow to look for work. Any suggestions?" Zara hesitated. "The Double R Ranch might be hiring. Mr. Reynolds loses cowboys every spring when they get restless, and there's always work at the livery or the mill." "I appreciate the information." Garrett turned to face her fully. "And I appreciate you taking us in, knowing that the town might talk more because of it." "They can hardly talk more than they already do," Zara said with a wry smile. "About that," Garrett said, his expression serious. "Would you tell me about your husbands? Not how they died unless you want to, but about who they were." The question caught Zara off guard. No one had ever asked her that. People were always morbidly curious about the deaths, not the lives. "Why would you want to know?" Garrett shrugged. "Seems only right to remember them for how they lived, not just how they died." Zara studied him, looking for signs of mockery or hidden agenda, but found only genuine interest. So she told him about Thomas's quick laugh and passion for books, about Edward's gentle way with horses and how he could name every star in the sky, about Daniel's skill with numbers, and the way he'd made her tea every morning without fail. As she spoke, the weight she carried seemed to lighten just a little. And Garrett listened, really listened, asking questions that showed he was paying attention. When she finally fell silent, he said quietly, "They sound like good men. You were lucky to have known them." "I was," Zara agreed, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you for asking about them." Garrett nodded, a simple acknowledgement. "I'll say good night, Mrs. McKenzie." "Zara," she corrected him. "If I'm to call you Garrett." "Zara," he repeated, and like her name in his mouth was something precious. "Good night." After he left, Zara remained in the kitchen for a long time, feeling as though something fundamental had shifted in her world. For the first time in years, someone had seen past the curse to the woman beneath. The next morning, Garrett left early for town, dressed in his cleanest shirt and with his hat brushed free of dust. Bess stayed behind, insisting on helping Zara with household chores despite Zara's protests. "I've never been one for sitting idle," Bess said as she kneaded bread dough with practiced hands. "And you've been alone too long, if you don't mind my saying so." "I don't mind," Zara admitted. "It's true. Garrett told me what the town says about you," Bess continued, her tone matter of fact. "About a curse." Zara's hand stilled on the shirt she was mending. "Does it bother you, child? I've seen enough of life to know that bad luck is just that, luck, not a curse." Bess shaped the dough into a loaf. "My Henry used to say that a person makes their own luck, good or bad, but I think sometimes the world just deals a hard hand. Doesn't mean the next hand won't be better." "That's a comforting thought," Zara said. "I hope you're right. Garrett thinks so too. Always has had good sense about people, that boy." Bess wiped flour from her hands. "Don't let him fool you with that quiet manner. He's got a sharp mind under that hat." "I can tell," Zara said. "How long do you plan to stay in Willits?" "That depends on Garrett. And on how long it takes us to save enough for the rest of our journey." Bess looked at Zara thoughtfully. "Unless something keeps us here longer." Zara didn't know how to respond to that, so she returned to her mending, aware of Bess's knowing gaze. Garrett returned late that afternoon, dust-covered but with a satisfied expression. "Got work at the Double R," he announced as he washed up. "Starting tomorrow." Mr. Reynolds was short-handed after 2 of his men left for Montana. "That's wonderful," Zara said. Did anyone tell you about me?" Garrett's expression hardened slightly. "They tried. I told them I wasn't interested in gossip." Zara exchanged a glance with Bess, who nodded as if confirming something she'd already known. "The job pays well enough," Garrett continued, "and includes meals at the ranch during working hours. I should be able to save for our journey and pay you fairly for our rooms." "I'm glad," Zara said, though part of her was already dreading the day they would leave. It had been less than a day, and already the house felt more alive with them in it. The days fell into a pattern. Garrett would leave before dawn for the Double R, returning tired but satisfied in the evenings. Bess and Zara would spend the days tending the small vegetable garden, cooking, cleaning, and sometimes walking into town for supplies, though Zara still avoided lingering there. The whispers followed them, of course. Zara could see the townsfolk talking behind their hands as she and Bess passed, could feel their stares as they wondered how long before tragedy befell the James family for daring to associate with the cursed widow. But Bess ignored them with a dignified tilt of her chin, engaging shopkeepers in pleasant conversation and introducing Zara as "my dear friend" in a way that brooked no argument. "Don't let them see they bother you," Bess advised as they walked home one day, baskets full of supplies. "People fear what they don't understand, and they don't understand why 3 healthy men died. It's easier to blame a curse than to accept that sometimes life is cruel for no reason." "But 3 husbands," Zara said quietly. "Even I sometimes wonder." "Nonsense," Bess said firmly. "I've known you barely a fortnight, and I can see you have a gentle heart. You loved those men. Their deaths were coincidence, nothing more. Zara wanted desperately to believe her. As April turned to May, the Double R began preparations for the spring cattle drive to Denver. Garrett would be gone for at least 3 weeks, leaving Bess and Zara alone. The night before he was to leave, Garrett sat on the porch with Zara after Bess had gone to bed. The evening was mild, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. "Will you be all right while I'm gone?" Garrett asked. "You and Aunt Bess will be fine," Zara assured him. "I've lived alone for over a year now, and your aunt is hardly helpless." "That's not what I meant," Garrett said. "The town, they haven't been kind to you, and with me gone." "We'll manage," Zara said. "Don't worry about us." Garrett turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "I find myself worrying about you more than I should, Zara." Her heart quickened at his words, at the way he looked at her. "Mr. James Garrett," he corrected gently. "Garrett, you shouldn't. That is, you know what they say about me." "I know what they say, I don't care. You should," Zara insisted, standing up. "3 husbands, Garrett, all dead within a year of marrying me. If that's not a curse, what is it?" Garrett stood as well, towering over her in the darkness. "Bad luck. Coincidence. The cruel hand of fate, but not a curse." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've seen real curses," Garrett said, his voice low. "I've seen men destroy themselves with drink and violence. I've seen women waste away from grief or hardship. I've seen hate and fear tear communities apart. Those are real curses, Zara, not some superstitious nonsense about a woman being unlucky in love." He stepped closer, and Zara didn't move away. "Besides," he continued, "if there was a curse, it would have struck me down by now, wouldn't it? I've been under your roof for nearly a month." "You're not my husband," Zara whispered. Something flashed in Garrett's eyes, something that made her breath catch. "No," he agreed. "I'm not." For a moment, Zara thought he might kiss her, and part of her, a part she'd thought long dead, wanted him to. But Garrett stepped back, breaking the spell. "I should get some rest," he said. "Early start tomorrow." "Of course," Zara replied, trying to hide her disappointment. "Good night, Garrett." "Good night, Zara." She watched him go inside, her heart pounding in a way it hadn't for years. This was dangerous, this feeling. She'd buried 3 men she loved. She couldn't bear to bury a 4th. Yet as she stood alone on the porch, looking up at the vast Colorado sky, she couldn't deny that Garrett James had awakened something in her, something she'd thought was as dead as her husband's. Hope. The 3 weeks of Garrett's absence dragged by with agonizing slowness. Zara found herself watching the road for signs of the returning cattle drive, even though she knew it was too soon. Bess noticed, of course. She noticed everything with those shrewd green eyes so like her nephew's. "He'll be back before you know it," she said one evening as they sat shelling peas on the porch. Zara felt her cheeks warm. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't," Bess said with a knowing smile. "Just like I don't know that my nephew has been half in love with you since the day we arrived." "Bess," Zara dropped a pea pod in shock. "That's not, he couldn't possibly." "And why not?" Bess challenged. "You're young, beautiful, kind-hearted. Any man with sense would see your worth." "But the curse—" "There is no curse," Bess interrupted firmly. "And Garrett knows that. He's not a superstitious man." Zara sighed, picking up the fallen pod. "Even if you're right, and I'm not saying you are, I couldn't bear it if something happened to him too. I've lost enough." Bess's expression softened. "Oh, my dear, fear is a poor reason to deny love. Take it from an old woman who knows life is too short and too precious to waste even a moment of potential happiness." Zara didn't respond, but Bess's words stayed with her, echoing in her mind as she lay awake that night. Could she risk loving again? Could she bear the weight of another loss if the worst happened? But equally, could she bear to send Garrett away, to live the rest of her life wondering what might have been? These questions still troubled her when trouble arrived in Willits in the form of Hugh Wilson, a man Zara had hoped never to see again. He came to her door on a rainy afternoon, his hulking frame filling the doorway, hat in his massive hands. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, using her last husband's name deliberately. "Been a while." Zara stood frozen, her hand still on the door. "Mr. Wilson, what do you want?" Hugh Wilson had been one of Edward's ranch hands, a brutish man with cruel eyes who had made no secret of his interest in Zara, even when she was Edward's wife. After Edward's death, he'd been one of the first to suggest she was somehow responsible. "Just being neighborly," Wilson said, a sly smile crossing his face. "Heard you had boarders staying with you. Thought I'd come check that everything was proper." "That's none of your concern," Zara said, starting to close the door. Wilson's hand shot out, stopping the door. "Now, that's not very hospitable, especially since I rode all the way out here in the rain." "Is there a problem, Zara?" Bess appeared behind her, her small frame somehow imposing despite her size. Wilson's eyes narrowed. "No problem, madam. Just having a friendly chat with the widow here." "It didn't look friendly to me," Bess said coolly. "And I believe Mrs. McKenzie was closing the door." Wilson's jaw tightened, but he withdrew his hand. "Just wanted to warn you, old woman. This one's bad luck. 3 husbands in the ground already. Some folks say she helped them along." "Some folks should mind their own business," Bess replied. "Good day, Mr. Wilson." This time, when Zara closed the door, Wilson didn't stop it. "Who was that awful man?" Bess asked as they returned to the kitchen. Zara's hands were shaking. "Hugh Wilson. He worked for Edward, my second husband. He's not a good man." "That much was obvious," Bess said. "Has he bothered you before?" "Not recently," Zara admitted. "Not since before I married Daniel. I thought he'd moved on." Bess frowned. "I don't like the way he looked at you. Like you were something to be hunted." Zara shivered. "That's always how he looked at me. Edward kept him in check, but after the accident." She trailed off, remembering the days after Edward's death, the way Wilson had started showing up at her door, offering to help the widow. "We should tell Garrett when he returns," Bess said. "No," Zara said quickly. "I don't want to cause trouble. Wilson will leave me alone. He always has eventually." Bess looked unconvinced but didn't press the issue, but Wilson didn't leave Zara alone. Over the next few days, he seemed to be everywhere, watching her house from a distance, appearing in town when she and Bess went for supplies, making comments just loud enough for her to hear about curses and widows and men who died too young. The situation came to a head 3 days before Garrett was due to return. Zara had gone to town alone, Bess being confined to bed with a mild fever. As she left the general store, Wilson stepped out from between 2 buildings, blocking her path. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, his voice slurring slightly. She could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Out all alone today?" "Excuse me," Zara said, trying to step around him. Wilson moved with her, staying in her way. "Not so fast. Been thinking about you, all alone in that big house. Wondering when you're going to stop pretending to be better than the rest of us." "Please move, Mr. Wilson," Zara said, her heart pounding. The street was nearly empty, most people inside due to the threatening rain. "You know what they call you in town." Wilson continued as if she hadn't spoken. "The Black Widow. The curse of Willits, but I know your secret." He leaned closer, his breath hot against her face. "You're just a woman who hasn't been properly handled. Your husbands were weak men. What you need is a real man who isn't afraid of tall tales." Zara backed away, but Wilson followed, grabbing her arm. "Let me go." "Not until you agree to be more neighborly," Wilson said, his grip tightening. "I've waited long enough. The lady asked you to let her go." The voice came from behind Wilson, hard as steel. Zara looked up to see Garrett standing there, dust-covered and travel-worn but with fire in his eyes. Wilson turned, not releasing Zara's arm. "This ain't your business, Cowboy." "I'm making it my business," Garrett said. He hadn't raised his voice, but something in his tone made Wilson's smile fade. "Now let her go before I remove your hand permanently." For a tense moment, Wilson seemed to consider his options. Then, with a sneer, he released Zara's arm. "Your new protector won't be around forever, Mrs. Patterson." And curses have a way of working themselves out. He shouldered past Garrett, who didn't move until Wilson was well down the street. "Are you all right?" Garrett asked, turning to Zara. She nodded, rubbing her arm where Wilson's fingers had dug in. "You're back early." The drive went faster than expected. Good weather. Garrett's gaze was fixed on the red marks on her arm. "Who was that?" "Hugh Wilson. He worked for my second husband, and he's been bothering you." Zara hesitated, then nodded. "Since you left, it's nothing I can't handle." "You shouldn't have to handle it," Garrett said, anger evident in his voice. "Has he threatened you before?" "Not exactly threatened," Zara said, "just made his intentions clear." Garrett's jaw tightened. "I see, and the sheriff?" "Sheriff Mills is a good man, but he can't arrest someone for making me uncomfortable. Wilson hasn't broken any laws. Putting hands on a woman against her will seems like breaking a law to me," Garrett said. He picked up the basket she dropped. "Come on, let's get you home." As they walked, Zara explained about Bess's fever and how Wilson had been watching the house. "I should have been here," Garrett said, his expression grim. "You couldn't have known," Zara said, "and I've dealt with men like Wilson before." "You shouldn't have to," Garrett repeated. Then more gently, "How's Aunt Bess?" "The fever's mild. She should be fine in a day or two." They reached the house, and Garrett insisted on checking the property before letting Zara inside. Bess was delighted to see her nephew despite her illness. "You're back early," she said, echoing Zara's earlier words. "Good timing, it seems," Garrett replied, his tone making it clear he knew about Wilson's harassment. Bess nodded. "That man is trouble, Garrett, the way he looks at Zara." "I know," Garrett said. "I saw it myself." He turned to Zara. "I'm staying here tonight. I'll sleep on the porch." "That's not necessary," Zara protested. "It is," Garrett insisted. "Until Wilson gets the message that you're not alone anymore." The way he said it, "not alone anymore," made Zara's heart skip, as if he meant to stay permanently. That night, after Bess had fallen asleep, Zara brought a blanket out to the porch where Garrett sat, rifle across his knees. "Thank you," she said, handing him the blanket. "For today and for this." Garrett took the blanket, his fingers brushing hers. "I meant what I said, Zara. You're not alone anymore." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Why did you come back early? Really?" Garrett was silent for a long moment. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," he finally admitted. "About what you said before I left about the curse. I needed to tell you that I don't care about any of that." Zara turned to face him. "You should care. Everyone who gets close to me ends up dead, Garrett. I couldn't bear it if you—" "Zara," Garrett interrupted gently. "I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not afraid of curses or bad luck or town gossip." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "When I first came to Willits, I was just passing through, taking Aunt Bess to California because I promised Uncle Henry I would. I had no plans to stay anywhere for long. And now?" Zara asked, barely breathing. "Now I can't imagine leaving," Garrett said. "Not without you." "Garrett, let me finish," he said. "I know it's too soon. I know you're afraid, but I'm asking you to give me a chance. Give us a chance." Zara looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused, hers small and pale. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "I know," Garrett said, squeezing her hand. "But I'm not." She looked up to find him watching her, his green eyes intense in the moonlight. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, A question more than a demand, and Zara found herself answering, her free hand coming up to touch his face when they broke apart. Zara's heart was racing, but not from fear. "I should go inside," she said softly. Garrett nodded, releasing her hand reluctantly. "I'll be right here." As she went inside, Zara touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem like a long, lonely road stretching before her. Instead, it held possibility, and that was both wonderful and terrifying. The next few days passed peacefully. Bess recovered from her fever. Garrett returned to his work at the Double R but came home to Zara's house each night, and there was no sign of Hugh Wilson. Zara began to hope that he'd given up, moved on to easier prey. She should have known better. Wilson came on a night when Garrett was working late at the ranch, helping with a difficult calving. Zara and Bess had finished supper and were sitting in the parlor, Bess knitting while Zara read aloud from a novel when the door burst open. Wilson stood there, whiskey bottle in hand, eyes wild. "Evening, ladies," he slurred. "Hope I'm not interrupting." Zara stood, placing herself between Wilson and Bess. "Get out of my house, Mr. Wilson." "Your house," Wilson repeated with a mocking laugh. "This should have been my house. You should have been my wife after Edward died. Instead, you married that banker and now you're making eyes at that cowboy." He took a step forward and Zara stepped back, keeping distance between them. "Zara," Bess said quietly from behind her, "the shotgun is in the kitchen." Wilson's eyes narrowed. "Don't try it, old woman. I'm not here to hurt anyone, just to talk some sense into the widow here." "I have nothing to say to you," Zara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Leave now before you do something you'll regret." "The only thing I regret," Wilson said, advancing further into the room, "is not making you mine when I had the chance. Before the banker. Before the cowboy." "My nephew will be home soon," Bess said, rising to stand beside Zara. "Your nephew is busy with a breech berth out at the Double R," Wilson said with a smirk. "Heard it myself in town. He won't be back till morning if then." A chill went through Zara. He'd been planning this, waiting for Garrett to be away. "What do you want?" she asked, though she knew the answer. Wilson's smile was ugly. "Just what's owed me. A little hospitality from the legendary Black Widow of Willits." He set down the whiskey bottle and reached for Zara. "Let's see if you're really cursed, or just particular about who shares your bed." Zara slapped his hand away. "Don't touch me." Wilson's face darkened with rage. "You uppity bitch," he lunged for her, but Bess moved with surprising speed, swinging her knitting needle like a dagger. It caught Wilson in the arm, making him howl with pain and surprise. "Run, Zara!" Bess cried. Zara grabbed Bess's hand and they bolted for the kitchen. Wilson recovered quickly, charging after them. They just reached the kitchen when he caught the back of Zara's dress, yanking her backward. "Let her go," Bess shouted, beating at Wilson with her fists. With a snarl, Wilson backhanded Bess, sending the older woman crashing into the table. She fell to the floor, motionless. "Bess," Zara cried, struggling against Wilson's grip. "Forget her," Wilson growled, dragging Zara toward the bedroom. "She's too old to watch anyway." Desperation gave Zara strength. She twisted in Wilson's grasp, her nails raking down his face. He cursed, loosening his grip enough for her to break free. She ran for the shotgun, mounted on hooks above the kitchen doorway. Wilson tackled her before she could reach it, sending them both crashing to the floor. Zara fought like a wildcat, kicking, scratching, biting, but Wilson was too strong. He pinned her down, his breath hot and whiskey sour against her face. "Stop fighting," he panted. "You'll like it once you stop fighting. Get off her." The voice was like ice cutting through the room. Wilson's head snapped up to see Garrett standing in the doorway, a revolver pointed steadily at Wilson's head. "This ain't your business, cowboy," Wilson said. though he didn't move from atop Zara. "I already told you," Garrett said, cocking the hammer. "I'm making it my business. Now get off her before I put a bullet between your eyes." Something in Garrett's tone must have convinced Wilson he was serious. Slowly he released Zara and stood up, hands raised slightly. "She invited me here," Wilson said. "Ask her. She's been leading me on for years." "That's a lie," Zara said, scrambling away from Wilson. She hurried to Bess, who was beginning to stir. "He hurt Bess." Garrett's expression hardened further. "You put hands on my aunt." Wilson must have seen something in Garrett's eyes then, something that warned him of real danger, because he suddenly lunged for the door. Garrett was faster, stepping into Wilson's path and driving the butt of his revolver into the man's temple. Wilson went down hard, blood streaming from the gash on his head. "Zara," Garrett said, not taking his eyes off Wilson, "are you hurt?" "No," she said, helping Bess to sit up. "But Bess, I'm all right," Bess said, though her voice was shaky. "Just had the wind knocked out of me." Garrett finally looked at them, relief evident in his face. "Thank God. I came back early, had a feeling." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Zara understood. He'd sensed something was wrong, just as she had often sensed when her husbands were in danger too late to save them, but she'd known all the same. Wilson groaned, beginning to regain consciousness. Garrett turned his attention back to the man on the floor. "What should we do with him?" Zara asked, her voice steadier now. "Take him to Sheriff Mills," Garrett said. "Breaking and entering, assault, attempted rape, he'll hang or go to prison." "If he makes it to trial," Bess muttered, touching the bruise forming on her cheek. Garrett's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll tie him up and take him in. You two stay here, lock the doors." Zara helped Garrett secure Wilson with rope from the barn, then watched as he loaded the still groggy man onto his horse. "I'll be back as soon as I can," Garrett promised, his hand lingering on Zara's. "Be careful," she said. "Wilson has friends in town." Garrett nodded, his expression grim. "Lock the doors." After he rode away, Zara and Bess secured the house, then sat at the kitchen table with cups of strong tea. "I'm sorry," Zara said after a long silence. "This is my fault. Wilson came after me, and you were hurt because of it." Bess reached across the table to take Zara's hand. "Nonsense. That man's actions are his responsibility alone, not yours." "But if I hadn't let you and Garrett stay here, then we wouldn't have been here when you needed us," Bess interrupted. "Everything happens for a reason, Zara, even the bad things." Zara stared into her tea. "I've never believed that. If things happen for a reason, why did my husbands die?" "What possible reason could there be for that?" Bess was quiet for a moment, considering. "I don't know," she finally said. "But I do know that if they hadn't, you wouldn't be here now, and neither would Garrett." The thought was both comforting and disturbing that the road of grief and loss had led her to this moment, to these people who were becoming as dear to her as family. "He cares for you deeply, you know," Bess said, as if reading Zara's thoughts. "I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." "I care for him too," Zara admitted, "but I'm afraid, Bess, afraid of what might happen." "We're all afraid of something, dear," Bess said. "The question is whether we let that fear rule us or whether we find the courage to live despite it." Before Zara could respond, they heard the sound of hooves approaching. They tensed until Garrett's voice called out, "It's me." Zara rushed to unlock the door, relief washing over her at the sight of him, unharmed and alone. "Wilson?" she asked as he stepped inside. "In a cell," Garrett said. "Sheriff Mills was understanding when I explained the situation, especially about Aunt Bess being hurt." He looked at his aunt, concern evident. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a mule," Bess said wryly, "but I'll live. That man hits like a child." Garrett smiled faintly, but his eyes were serious. Wilson was drunk, but he knew what he was doing. He'd been planning this, waiting for a chance when I wouldn't be here. I know, Zara said. I should have taken his threats more seriously. We all should have, Garrett agreed. He reached out, gently touching the bruise forming on Zara's wrist where Wilson had grabbed her. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner. You were here when it mattered, Zara said softly. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. Bess, watching them, cleared her throat. Well, she said, rising from her chair, I think I'll turn in. It's been quite enough excitement for one night. After she left, Garrett and Zara remained in the kitchen, neither speaking for a long moment. I was scared, Zara finally admitted, not just for myself but for Bess, and for you when you confronted Wilson. I was scared too, Garrett said. When I rode up and heard the commotion inside. He trailed off, his fists clenching at the memory. I've never wanted to kill a man before tonight. I'm glad you didn't, Zara said. Not for his sake, but for yours. Garrett nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Wilson will face justice. Sheriff Mills said there have been complaints about him before from other women. This time he won't get away with it. Good, Zara said. She hesitated, then asked, How did you know to come back early, the calving? Someone else took over, Garrett said. I just had a feeling, something telling me I needed to be here. He looked at her intently. I've learned to trust those feelings. I'm glad you did, Zara whispered. Garrett stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Zara, when I saw Wilson on top of you, I realized something. I can't lose you, I won't. Garrett, let me finish, he said gently. I know you're afraid of this curse you believe in, but I'm more afraid of not telling you how I feel while I have the chance. He took a deep breath. I love you, Zara McKenzie. I think I've loved you since that first night on the porch when you told me about your husbands, not how they died, but how they lived, how you loved them. Tears filled Zara's eyes. You can't love me, she whispered. It's too dangerous. Life is dangerous, Garrett countered. Every day I could be thrown from a horse, gored by a bull, struck by lightning. But that doesn't mean I stop living. He wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. And loving you is the most alive I've ever felt. Zara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. I love you too, she admitted, the words both terrifying and liberating. But I'm so afraid of what might happen. Then we'll face that fear together, Garrett said. Day by day. He kissed her then, and Zara let herself believe just for a moment that perhaps the curse had finally been broken. The trial of Hugh Wilson was the talk of Willits for weeks. Zara, Bess, and Garrett all testified, along with several other women who came forward with stories of Wilson's harassment. In the end, the judge sentenced him to 10 years in the territorial prison, a verdict that brought Zara both relief and a sense of justice long overdue. Throughout the ordeal, Garrett never left her side, his steady presence a comfort she'd almost forgotten was possible. And gradually, the whispers about the cursed widow began to fade, replaced by new gossip about the cowboy who defied superstition to love her. They're saying you're either the bravest man in Colorado or the most foolish, Zara told Garrett one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Garrett laughed, the sound warming her heart. Let them talk. They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough. They're betting on how long you'll last, Zara continued, trying to keep her tone light despite the fear that still lingered. The blacksmith gave you 6 months. Mrs. Peterson at the hotel was more generous, she said, a year. Garrett turned to her, his expression serious despite his earlier laughter. And what do you think, Zara? How long will I last? Zara looked away. I don't like to think about it. Look at me, Garrett said softly, waiting until she met his eyes before continuing. I'm not going anywhere. Not in 6 months, not in a year, not ever unless you ask me to. I would never ask you to leave, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Good, Garrett said, because I have a proposal for you. Zara's heart skipped a beat. Garrett, hear me out, he said, taking her hands in his. I love you, Zara McKenzie. I love your strength, your kindness, your resilience. I love how you face this town's cruelty without becoming cruel yourself. I love how you care for Aunt Bess as if she were your own family. He took a deep breath. The Double R has offered me a permanent position as foreman. It means I could stay in Willits, build a life here. With you, if you'll have me. You know what they say about me, Zara said, though her resolve was weakening with every word he spoke. 3 husbands, all dead within a year. Then I'll be the 4th, Garrett said simply, and I'll break the curse by refusing to die. A surprised laugh escaped Zara, part joy and part disbelief. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, Garrett insisted. I love you, you love me, the rest is just details. And what does Bess say about this plan of yours? Garrett smiled. She says she's never seen me so happy, and that if I don't marry you soon, she'll do the proposing for me. Zara could imagine Bess saying exactly that, and the thought made her smile despite her fears. So, Garrett continued, his expression growing serious again. What do you say, Zara McKenzie? Will you marry me and make me the happiest man in Colorado and the most stubbornly alive 4th husband in Willits history? Zara looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but love and certainty there. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope, to believe in a future that wasn't defined by loss and loneliness. Yes, she whispered, and then louder. Yes, Garrett James, I will marry you. Garrett's face lit up with a joy so pure it took her breath away. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left no doubt of his feelings. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. I promise you, Zara, I will do everything in my power to prove that there is no curse-only life, with all its joys and sorrows. And if you're wrong, Zara couldn't help asking. Then we'll have had whatever time we're given, Garrett said, and that's more than many people get in this world. It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was honest. And perhaps that was all anyone could ask for honesty and love in an uncertain world. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony in Zara's garden. Pastor Williams officiated. Bess stood as witness, and to Zara's surprise, several townspeople attended, including Sheriff Mills and his wife, Mr. Reynolds from the Double R, and even Mrs. Peterson from the hotel, who brought a cake and wished them well with only the slightest hesitation. People can change their minds, Bess whispered to Zara as they watched the small crowd mingle after the ceremony. Sometimes they just need a good reason. Garrett, handsome in a new suit, came to stand beside them, his hand finding Zara's as naturally as breathing. Everything all right. Perfect, Zara said and meant it. For the first time in years, she felt truly happy, the shadow of the so-called curse receding in the face of their love. That night, as they lay together in what was now their bedroom, Garrett traced lazy patterns on Zara's bare shoulder. Mrs. James, he murmured, the name still new and wonderful to her ears. How does it feel to be married for the 4th time? Different, Zara admitted. Better. Because I'm so charming, Garrett teased, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. Zara smiled in the darkness. Because for the first time I'm not afraid. Or rather, I am afraid, but I'm not letting that fear stop me from loving you completely. Garrett gathered her closer. That's all I ask. As the months passed, Zara waited for the familiar dread to return, for signs that the curse was working its insidious magic once again. But Garrett remained healthy and whole, riding out to the Double R each morning and returning each evening, filling their home with laughter and love. The first anniversary of their wedding approached, the milestone that had always marked the end for Zara's previous marriages. Despite her resolve not to give in to superstition, she found herself growing tense as the date drew near. Garrett noticed, of course. He noticed everything about her. "What's troubling you?" he asked one night as they prepared for bed. "And don't say nothing. I know you better than that." Zara sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Our anniversary is next week." Understanding dawned in Garrett's eyes. "Ah, the 1-year mark." "I know it's foolish," Zara said. "I know there's no curse, but I can't help thinking that I might drop dead at the stroke of midnight." Garrett finished for her, a slight smile playing at his lips. "It's not funny," Zara protested, though she couldn't help a small smile of her own at his tone. "No, it's not," Garrett agreed, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "But it's also not going to happen. I'm as healthy as a horse, the double R is thriving under my management, and I have no plans to go anywhere except by your side for the next 50 years or so." 50 years, Zara repeated, the time span almost impossible to imagine after so much loss. "At least," Garrett confirmed. "I'm planning to be a very annoying old man who tells the same stories over and over while you pretend to listen." Zara laughed despite herself. "I'll hold you to that, Garrett James." "Good," he said, kissing her softly. "Now stop worrying and come to bed. We have a long, boring, curse-free life ahead of us, and I intend to enjoy every minute of it with you." The day of their anniversary dawned bright and clear, a perfect Colorado spring day. Zara woke to find Garrett already up, his side of the bed empty but still warm. She found him in the kitchen with Bess, both of them conspiratorially quiet as she entered. "What are you two plotting?" Zara asked, amused by their guilty expressions. "Nothing at all," Bess said with an innocence that fooled no one. "Just discussing the weather." "The weather," Zara repeated skeptically. "Absolutely," Garrett confirmed, coming to kiss her good morning. "Very important. The weather affects everything." "If you say so," Zara said, accepting a cup of coffee from Bess. "I need to head to town for some supplies," Bess announced. "And Garrett, don't you have work at the ranch today?" "Not today," Garrett said. "Mr. Reynolds gave me the day off. Said something about an anniversary being more important than cattle." Zara looked between them, suspicion growing. "What are you planning?" "Nothing that requires your concern," Bess said firmly. "Now I'll be off. Don't expect me back until late." After Bess left, Garrett turned to Zara with a mischievous smile. "I have a surprise for you. Get dressed for riding." "Riding where?" Zara asked, but Garrett just shook his head. That would ruin the surprise. An hour later they were on horseback, Garrett leading the way into the hills beyond Willits. The spring grass was emerald green, dotted with wildflowers, and the air was sweet with the scent of pine and new growth. "Where are we going?" Zara asked again as they followed a trail she didn't recognize. "Patience," Garrett replied with a grin. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" Her question was answered as they crested a ridge and a small valley opened up before them. A clear stream wound through it, and in the center stood a cabin, newly built, smoke curling from its chimney. "Garrett," Zara breathed, reining in her horse. "What is this?" "This," Garrett said, his expression a mixture of pride and nervousness, "is our future if you want it." He dismounted and helped Zara down from her horse, then took her hand and led her toward the cabin. "I've been working on it for months," he explained as they approached, "with help from some of the men from the Double R. Mr. Reynolds owns this land, but he's agreed to sell it to us as part of my bonus for increasing the herd's value this year." Zara was speechless as Garrett opened the door. Inside, the cabin was simple but beautiful, with large windows that filled the main room with light. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a fire already burning cheerfully in the grate. The furniture was handcrafted: a table and chairs, a rocking chair by the fire, a bed visible through a doorway to a second room. "There's a bedroom for us and one for Aunt Bess," Garrett said, watching her face anxiously. "And room to add on when we need to." "When we need to," Zara repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Garrett's ears reddened slightly. "For children, if you want them." Tears filled Zara's eyes as she looked around the cabin, their home. She'd never dared to think this far ahead, to plan for a future beyond the dreaded one-year mark. "You like it?" Garrett asked, uncertainty creeping into his voice at her silence. Zara turned to him, unable to contain her joy any longer. "Like it? Garrett, I love it, I love you." She threw her arms around him and he held her close, his relief palpable. "I was so worried you might think it presumptuous," he admitted, "making this decision without consulting you." "It's perfect," Zara assured him. "Absolutely perfect." They spent the day exploring their new home and the surrounding land. Garrett showed her the garden he'd started, the barn he was building for their horses, the place by the stream where he thought they might put a swing for children someday. As the sun began to set, they sat on the porch of their cabin, Zara leaning against Garrett's chest, his arms around her. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. James," he murmured into her hair. "Happy anniversary," she replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. And as the last light of their first anniversary faded into night, Zara realized that the fear that had been her constant companion for so long had finally, truly released its hold on her heart. The curse, if it had ever existed, was broken at last. They moved into their cabin the following week, Bess declaring it, "About time I had my own room again," with a wink at Zara. Life settled into a new pattern, Garrett working at the Double R, Zara tending their home and garden, Bess becoming a beloved figure to the children in the area with her stories and cookies. The town's attitude toward Zara continued to change as well. As months passed with Garrett hale and hearty, the whispers about curses faded away, replaced by more ordinary gossip about crops and weather, and whose daughter was stepping out with whose son. A year became 2, then 3. Zara and Garrett's cabin grew with the addition of a new room when Zara discovered she was expecting their first child. Joy mingled with fear as her pregnancy progressed. Would the curse touch their child if not Garrett? But when their son was born, healthy and strong with his father's green eyes, the last of Zara's fears dissolved. They named him Henry, after Bess's husband, and the old woman wept as she held her great-nephew for the first time. "He looks just like Garrett did as a baby," she declared. "Same determined chin." "Poor child," Garrett joked, earning a swat from his aunt. As Henry grew from infant to toddler, the cabin expanded again for the arrival of his sister, Eleanor. Bess, now moving more slowly but still sharp as ever, declared herself the luckiest great-aunt in Colorado to have 2 such perfect children to spoil. Life wasn't always easy. There were hard winters, drought summers, times when the Double R struggled and Garrett came home tired and worried. But through it all, Zara never again feared the curse. Whatever happened, they would face it together as a family. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Garrett and Zara stood on the porch of their cabin, now a proper house with 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a parlor where friends gathered regularly watching 7-year-old Henry and 5-year-old Eleanor chase fireflies in the dusk. 10 years, Zara marveled, leaning against her husband's solid frame. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Garrett said, his arm around her waist, "and believe in the next 10 and the 10 after that." "I do," Zara said, and meant it with all her heart. From inside the house, Bess called the children for bedtime and they ran laughing to the porch. "Papa, will you tell us a story?" Eleanor asked, her dark hair so like Zara's coming loose from its braids. "What kind of story?" Garrett asked, lifting her into his arms. "The one about how you and Mama met," Henry said, always eager for tales of adventure. "Again," Garrett pretended to groan. "Haven't you heard that one enough, please?" The children chorused. Garrett looked at Zara, his eyes full of love and shared memories. "What do you think, Mrs. James? Shall we tell them again about the cursed widow and the stubborn cowboy who refused to believe in curses?" Zara smiled, her heart full to bursting with the life they'd built together. "Yes," she said, "let's tell them our story." And as they went inside, a family bound by love rather than superstition, Zara knew that the true magic had never been a curse at all, but the courage to love again despite all fear, and a cowboy who had been brave enough to say, "Then I'll be the fourth." In the years that followed, the story of Zara McKenzie and Garrett James became something of a legend in Willits. The tale changed with each telling. Sometimes she had been falsely accused of murdering her husband. Sometimes he had made a dramatic wager with the townsfolk that he would survive the curse. But the heart of the story remained the same, a love strong enough to defy superstition and fear. When Bess passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, surrounded by family who loved her, she was laid to rest in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking their home. Garrett carved her headstone himself, inscribing it with the words she had lived by: "Faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love." Henry grew up to take over the Double R when Mr. Reynolds retired, marrying a schoolteacher from Denver who brought books and music into the lives of everyone in Willits. Eleanor, as independent as her mother, trained as a nurse and opened a small clinic in town, eventually marrying the son of Sheriff Mills. And through it all, Garrett and Zara remained the center of their growing family, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 30th anniversary, with silver threading Garrett's dark hair and laugh lines crinkling the corners of Zara's eyes, they sat on the porch of their home as they had so many evenings before, watching the sunset paint the Colorado sky. 30 years, Garrett mused, his hand finding Zara's as naturally as breathing. Not bad for a cursed widow and her foolhardy fourth husband. Zara laughed, the sound as young and joyful as ever. Not bad at all for a stubborn cowboy who didn't believe in curses. "Best decision I ever made," Garrett said, bringing her hand to his lips, defying that curse. Was there ever really a curse? Zara wondered aloud. Or just bad luck and a town too ready to believe the worst? "Does it matter?" Garrett asked. "Whatever it was, we broke it." "No," Zara said, resting her head on his shoulder as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "It doesn't matter at all." And in the home they had built together, surrounded by the legacy of their loved children, grandchildren, a community that had learned to look beyond superstition to see the truth of the human heart, they watched the night fall, secure in the knowledge that some loves are strong enough to outlast any curse.